Hello and welcome back. So today we're going a bit off the boards and we're going to discuss the biggest problem that the NHL faces as it tries to expand and capture a wider audience. And that is blackout restrictions. So if you've ever sat down and tried to watch your favorite team and been unable to find it on your local cable channels, or if it's been blacked out on your major streaming services, this video is for you. We're not necessarily going to cover everything in Canada because this is mainly discussing the new TV deals and the phenomenon happening in the United States. But before we dive into the details, let's first define the problem. So the problem is simple. The NHL has signed not one, but two massive TV deals in 2021 to bring their product to ESPN and TNT. They now have to deliver viewership, sponsorships, and ad revenue to their network partners to make it worth their while. The NHL has long been seen as one of the big four sports in North America, alongside football, baseball, basketball, lagging pretty far behind in some of those sports in terms of viewership and revenue. But now, according to a 2017 Gallup poll, soccer has overtaken hockey as the number 4 sport in the U.S., with 7% of Americans polled answering that soccer is their favorite sport to watch compared to 4% for hockey. Now, it's difficult to know exactly how COVID-19 truly impacted this trend, but stopping the season definitely hurt ratings. So what you see here, this is the average viewership for the Stanley Cup Finals. These are the COVID years where everything kind of took a humongous dip. People just didn't want to watch hockey without people in the stands. They didn't want to watch in a bubble. People were kind of fed up with COVID and everything else. And now with all of that gone, there's still some fans that haven't come back, and diehard hockey fans are resorting to extreme measures to find their favorite teams because they're blacked out. So a friend of mine at work, he's one of these people. He stopped watching during COVID. He's trying to get back into it, but now his local cable channels don't have the local hockey team. So this has been a major problem, not just for him, but for a lot of other people, as we've seen in this poll that I conducted on our channel. So this is, have you ever or are you currently experiencing difficulty finding your favorite team's games because of blackout restrictions or lack of access? 43% of people surveyed can't watch their team. 35% are forced to find a stream or borrow somebody else's login. So this is a disturbing trend that we're seeing across many different parts of the United States, where people just simply can't find reasonable access to their games, and they're being forced to do crazier things like find illegal streaming sites that potentially install malware on your computer. The easiest thing is to get a VPN. A lot of people are doing that, but this isn't the way that it should be done. The NHL should be catering to its diehard fans. So let's take a look back at the history and see how we got here. So in 1992, a sports channel deal with the NHL ended, and ESPN bought a 5-year contract worth $80 million. Then, throughout the 90s, there was, the game was growing pretty well. There were new sponsorships, corporate tie-ins like the Mighty Ducks and Disney and so on. So in 1998, ESPN decides to renew their contract, this time worth $600 million from 1999 until 2004. And then when the time came to renew that contract yet again, ESPN only offered $60 million per year for 2 years, and ABC also refused to air the Stanley Cup Finals in prime time. So according to an article by Kevin Downey that I'll link in the description below, Disney executives later conceded that they overpaid for that 1999 to 2004 deal, hence the lower offer. And this is important because new ESPN deals, the ones that were just signed with ESPN and Turner, are even more money than what you see here. So if ESPN doesn't feel like they're getting a return on investment over the course of this deal, they may do what they did in 2004 and lowball the NHL and walk away from hockey altogether, which would hurt a lot of the momentum and the growth in the game. Now, somewhat scrambling for a broadcast partner in 2004 in the middle of the lockout, the NHL signed a unique deal with NBC. So at the time, it was a zero money down. There was no initial, price to acquire the NHL on NBC. It was mainly split ad revenue. That was the way that deal was structured. They, split it. I don't know if it was 50-50, but that's how both sides made their money in this deal. And then the NHL also signed a deal with Comcast, who paid $70 million for 3 years to broadcast around 54 games nationally on OLN, later rebranded to Versus. So in the first few years, likely due to the inability of most customers to find OLN or Versus in their cable package, and that's something that we're going to come back to in a little bit. Ratings were fairly bad. So the 2007 Stanley Cup Final, for example, saw 523,000 people tune in for Game 1 and was the 58th highest rated program that day. Yikes. So in addition to that, Game 1 rated 0.5, Game 2 rated 0.4 on the rating scale, lower than the 2006 WNBA All-Star Game. So ratings weren't much better when they moved to NBC for primetime Stanley Cup coverage that year, as Game 3, which was aired on NBC, was the lowest rated primetime broadcast in the network's history. Now, things did improve from that. The initial bugs were worked out. They started to get NHL on NBC going, and the ratings definitely improved and were much more comparable to the NBA instead of the WNBA. But despite all of this ratings turmoil, in 2011, after merging with Comcast, NBC re-upped with a 10-year extension worth almost $2 billion, so about $200 million per year. And from that, we got Thanksgiving games, we got continued Winter Classics, a National Game of the Week, Hockey Day in America, and many other perks. But this led to much higher viewership and helped grow the game over this time span. And, we're really thankful that the league did what they did with NBC and they made it work. But this brings us to today and the new TV deals signed in 2021 with ESPN and Turner. So for ESPN, or Disney is their parent company, they're paying $2.8 billion over 7 years, or roughly $400 million a year for the NHL rights. And Turner is paying around $1.6 billion over 7 years, or roughly $230 million per season to try their hand at hockey. And to be honest with you, I like the coverage that's coming out of ESPN and TNT. They've come out with some new innovations like the power play clock on the ice that I really like. They have the shot clock over the net. Once players shoot the puck over 80 miles an hour, it pops up and tells you how hard they're shooting it. I like a lot of those things. And then I also like ESPN Plus, which is basically doing the same thing that Game Center used to do, or Center Ice, or whatever, NHL.TV. But they're also doing it now on ESPN Plus, and that's available on Hulu, which is very nice. The one problem is, unless you own a VPN, you can't watch your in-market games at all. So even if you pay the $100 or so in the US for ESPN Plus, you still don't get those local games. So imagine you already have a cable or streaming package. You may or may not get the local sports channels, but assume you don't. Now you fork over an additional $99 to get access to every NHL game, and yet the ones you really want are still unavailable to you. This is the reality for many people across the United States, and I can speak from experience living in the New York, New Jersey metro area. And currently in this area, the only way to watch the Rangers, Islanders, Devils, Sabres, Knicks, Nets, and many other popular sports is via MSG networks. And MSG does a terrific job with their coverage. They have some pioneering technology. They have some of the best in the business on their channels. The only problem is, since October 1st, 2021, most people in this area can't watch MSG at all. So they're in a feud with Comcast, basically, disputing the value of the channels, and we'll get into that in just a second. So now, the only way to get MSG is through DirecTV Stream or through Fubo TV. And I don't actually want anything else on Fubo TV or DirecTV Stream. I just want the local sports channels to get the local teams. But they're trying to charge $69.99 for everything that I don't want, and then an additional $8.99 local sports fee for the channels that I do want. And it's just as bad for DirecTV, who packages everything together for almost $90 per month for DirecTV Stream. I don't want to pay that. I just want the local sports. So why is this happening? Well, this is what MSG said about this feud with Comcast. They said they're trying to force us to accept terms they'd never agreed to for their own regional sports networks. They've rejected proposals that are consistent with the current deals and deals that they have with many other major providers, yada, yada, yada. Comcast claps back and says almost 95% of all customers who received MSG over the past year didn't watch more than 10 of the 240 games it broadcast. Additionally, 80% of customers didn't watch any MSG content at all each month in that time frame. So Comcast is essentially saying that, at a time when people are cutting the cord and ditching cable in record numbers, you're asking us to pay a massive amount of money for a product that almost 95% of customers didn't watch substantially, and 80% of customers didn't watch at all. MSG is saying, look, we've signed these deals with you in the past. We've signed these deals with other people in the past. What's changed? So there seems to be an impasse on both sides, but this is not the only example. So the other night I was watching the Avalanche game, and in between periods there was an impassioned plea by Peter McNabb, basically talking about this exact phenomenon, which kind of struck me because I was doing the research for this video. And apparently Comcast and Dish Networks haven't aired Avs or Denver Nuggets games since the 18-19 season. So Altitude Sports is a regional sports network that's owned by Kronka Sports Entertainment, the same company that owns the Avs and the Nuggets. They had a 15-year deal with Dish and Comcast, and that expired in 18-19. And at that point, according to an article from the Denver Post, Comcast's latest proposal to Altitude for broadcasting rights to Nuggets and Avalanche games represented a 50% pay cut from the previous agreed-upon contract, per a source familiar with the negotiations. Comcast would also remove Altitude from an expanded basic package to a sports tier, decreasing the percentage of subscribers reached from 70 to 85% down to 15 to 20%, according to a lawsuit. So this got so bad that Altitude Sports filed a lawsuit against Comcast for monopolistic practices. And in that lawsuit, that's where that quote comes from, that they're trying to cut their contract by 50%, and they're decreasing the percentage of subscribers down to 15 to 20%. So if we take this at face value, Comcast is trying to claim that most people don't watch these games and these channels, and therefore they shouldn't be paying full price for them, which is why they lowball them on the offer, which may be true. But is there another reason that Comcast is lowballing these regional sports networks and refusing to carry the channels? So here, the lawsuit, the complaint cites that Comcast has launched or acquired 11 regional sports networks, and in recent years has attempted to quadruple its holdings. So, they have NBC Sports Philadelphia, NBC Sports Chicago, Bay Area, etc. There's 11 of these, and they will either attempt to either buy Altitude or set up its own regional sports network to replace Altitude. And this person says, if you're an independent regional sports network out there and your contract is coming up in the future, I would read this complaint with great interest. So what Altitude is claiming is that Comcast is acting like a monopoly. They're trying to force Altitude out of business by lowballing them and keeping their product off of most cable packages in that area in an attempt to try to replace them or buy them and then replace them with something like an NBC Sports Colorado. So this is incredibly troubling, especially for the Stanley Cup champions. So if you live in this area and you just, you love the Avs and you want to watch the games and everything else, you missed the entire Stanley Cup championship season last year except for the nationally broadcast games. So this is a humongous problem for the NHL. They just, one of the greatest seasons in Avalanche history. A lot of the great, stories that were coming out of this season, and none of it was seen by anybody within that network. And this is what happens when exclusive rights are in play. Teams can negotiate their own regional sports contracts, and in many cases, the parent company of the sports team is the same one that owns the regional sports network. So they have a monopoly over the product that they're trying to sell to the cable companies, and they try to jack up the prices for that because that's the main way that they fund their expenses. But in return, the cable companies don't see the benefit of dealing with the regional sports network that has a monopoly over the local sports TV rights, especially at a time when people are ditching cable in record numbers and they need to be as cost efficient as possible to survive. So it kind of makes sense for both sides, but if both sides are to blame, how do we solve this issue? How do we get through and finally make it so that you can watch your favorite teams? Now, almost all sports television contracts, especially the new NHL deal, are a product of this piece of legislation, the 1961 Sports Broadcasting Act. And that was a response to litigation regarding the NFL's method of packaging all of their local teams' rights into one major national package and selling that to a network. There was claims that violated the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, which you may have heard about in history class. And this 1961 law acted as a carve-out for national sports leagues to allow them to collectively package their television rights and sell them to networks, as it's in every individual team's best interest to do so. This act also apparently upheld local broadcasting rights and allowed monopoly power for regional sports networks by having them deny anyone else from broadcasting the games within their local areas. So this is the main reason why we have blackouts. Now, at the time, there was also a provision for blackouts. If you didn't sell enough tickets for a home game, they could black out the game as well. That's kind of fallen by the wayside, but this provision is still the main reason why we have blackouts in any major sports network now. And How can the NHL address the concerns of its viewers and customers and still satisfy the needs of their franchise owners and network partners if this is the deal that they have to work around in terms of the legality of dealing with their sports packages? So this is that provision right here. This is Section 1292. This is the exact thing that limits the NHL from being able to force their regional sports networks to not black out games on major things like ESPN Plus or whatever. This is what causes blackouts. So the first thing that the NHL could do if they wanted to solve this problem is to pass the Fans Act. So the Fans Act was brought to Congress in 2013. It was later reintroduced in 2015. And essentially all it does is it repeals the exemption that allows the antitrust exemption for a joint agreement that prohibits televising games within the home territory of a member club. So it repeals that one section of that 1961 law that provides the blackout, the ability to black out games in your local area. Now, the NHL would have to quietly engage in lobbying Congress to pass this act because one of the problems is that Comcast is one of the major companies that we just discussed in all of this, but Comcast also is a NHL franchise owner. They own the Flyers. So technically speaking, Gary Bettman also works for Comcast's best interest with any official action that he takes. So if he were to try to end this monopoly exemption for local blackouts, it would absolutely affect Comcast. And Comcast is a $116 billion company that has much more lobbying power than the NHL ever could. So they would have to quietly do this and sneak this by Comcast, and I don't think that's a reasonable expectation. So what's another option? Option number 2 is for these regional sports networks to simply add a fee or a payment structure to the app that they already have in existence in many cases to allow people to watch their local sports teams. So for example, MSG has this MSG Go app where you can watch your local sports teams and cast them to your TV. And in order to use that, you need to have a cable login. Well, why don't you just add a subscription tier to that and bypass the entire cable login process? So that seems to be one thing that some of these regional sports networks are moving towards. So Bally Sports, formerly Fox Sports, already jumped on this train. Bally Sports has a regional broadcast rights with many NHL teams: Coyotes, Red Wings, Panthers, Blues, Wild, Blue Jackets, Ducks, Kings, Hurricanes, Predators, Stars, and Lightning. And according to an article on June 23rd, 2022, they began a direct-to-consumer product exactly like this based on their already existing Bally Sports app. This service is sold for $19.99 per month or $189 per year and is already launched in 5 cities. So it hasn't been completely rolled out yet to all of those NHL fan bases, but it is a promising sign. And for $19.99 a month, I would absolutely pay that just to get the local sports teams. The first regional sports network to try this approach was NESN with NESN 360. That launched a few weeks earlier in June of 2022, and that subscription is priced at $29.99 per month and $329 per year, which is a bit steeper than Bally, but they have fewer teams within their umbrella, so they need to recoup their costs. Bally can kind of spread that over a number of different teams and across different time zones and networks that they have contracts with. But the problem for the league is that this doesn't put hockey in front of new eyeballs. So the NHL needs more new hockey fans to see the game wherever they watch their content, and more viewers equals more revenue. So how do you accomplish that with this? So this seems to be a temporary stopgap measure to the problem. If you just allow the people that are being affected by these contract disputes to have access to an app like this, that does help, but we need a better solution. So this solution, option 3, the affected regional sports networks like MSG, Altitude, Bally, etc., they could potentially opt into the ESPN Plus contract with the NHL and allow local customers access to their local sports teams via ESPN Plus. So essentially what I'm proposing in this option is the NHL would have to funnel some of the money from the TV deal that they just got. They made a massive amount of money over that time frame. So they'd have to set up a new contract with one of these regional sports networks and allow them to stop blacking out their games on ESPN Plus. That's all it would take. We give you some money, you stop blacking out the games, and we'll air them on ESPN Plus, which gives you access to Hulu's 39.4 million subscription base. So right now, ESPN Plus is on Hulu, and you can get it as part of the Disney Plus package, or you can get it on Hulu as part of a different package on Hulu. But it brings the NHL and all of these local games to Hulu, which potentially will increase viewership. So this is a potential solution that could, kind of act as a little bit more than a stopgap, as we saw with option 2. That was a little bit more of like a temporary solution. This could potentially add more of these games into the already existing national television product. But there is one option that's potentially better than all of this. And guess who came up with this idea first? This is the dream. This is very simple and a commonly shared dream that we all have. And guess who already did it? It's soccer. So MLS signed a $2.5 billion deal, a 10-year deal with Apple TV to allow every MLS game, regional, national, or otherwise, to be available blackout free with a subscription. So this came out. It's going to be rolled out in 2023. Every match for every fan. For the first time in the history of sports, fans will be able to access everything from a major professional sports league in one place. That is the key. And I mentioned before how both the regional sports networks and the cable companies were acting like monopolies. Well, why not create our own monopoly in terms of viewership for the NHL's product? Make ESPN Plus an even bigger monopoly and give the NHL the protection and benefits of doing business with this type of monopoly. So long term, this would absolutely have negative impacts because there'd be a lack of choice. You wouldn't be allowed to, if they wanted to start jacking up the price and it's only available in one place, that could potentially be a problem. But it is the easiest and best solution for consumers at this point, barring any legislative changes that we mentioned earlier. It's the best for both the league and the fans, as the league can still support regional networks by allocating proportional compensation commensurate with viewership. So, for example, if MSG is driving, 1 million viewers versus another, a smaller market team is, 200,000 viewers, they can funnel that proportional amount of money to MSG as opposed to the other league. If it got so bad, they could do some sort of a revenue sharing thing like the NFL does, but it's good for the national rights holders, ESPN, because they would be given dibs on the contract and have exclusive rights to every game in the league, which would obviously increase their bottom line. But the most important thing is it would be better for fans, because now fans would not only be able to see every one of their favorite team's games, no matter where they are, but they also wouldn't be forced to have a cable package, a streaming package, multiple subscriptions to different things. Instead, it will all be centered in one app that they can cast to any device that they want. And it would potentially also, if you had that package and you didn't necessarily know about it, now all of a sudden you start seeing your favorite local team's games pop up in your Hulu suggestion feed. So you're on your main Hulu feed and you see Rangers versus so-and-so and you're in that area, you can now watch that game without having it blacked out. That could potentially increase the amount of eyeballs on this product. So this seems to be the dream scenario for anyone other than maybe baby boomers who can't figure out how streaming or apps work. But for the rest of us, this is the best case scenario. So how do we get this to happen? Well, the best way is to hope that Gary Bettman and the league offices see this video, or at the very least see the MLS deal, and they have to hear us yelling and screaming for this exact type of product in the NHL. We have to relentlessly take to social media and force the NHL to comment on these blackout restrictions and the fact that many people still can't see games. And if they see this as a potential solution to their problem, maybe they will come around. At the end of the day, everything comes back to money. So we have to make sure that the league sees that this is absolutely the best thing for them to do, monetarily speaking. They have to understand that this is going to boost their bottom line and increase the viewership and ad revenue for the entire league. And that will help everybody, including the salary cap rise. It'll help escrow get chewed down back to pre-COVID levels. This will help a lot of things within the NHL ecosystem if we can make sure that they understand that this is economically viable. So this is obviously, this is a different thing because MLS didn't really have a national footprint as the NHL does. So they were able to negotiate this $2.5 billion deal with Apple TV. Apple TV is relatively desperate to get something like this because they don't have any sports on their platform at all. So it kind of worked hand in glove. But we already have the major network. We already have these massive contracts that the NHL just signed. So find a way to make this product happen. It's very easy. I just gave you a couple of different solutions, Gary Bettman. If none of these work, that's fine. I understand. I don't know any of the details of these deals. I'm just some idiot on YouTube trying to solve this problem because it pissed me off that much. So hopefully the league will respond in some sort of reasonable time frame to this, and hopefully it doesn't take 5 or 10 years to come into place, because this is something, technology is moving very fast, and this is something that we can absolutely accomplish right now. We just need to put this in front of the league and get their attention to show them that this is the way forward. Now, I do admit that this is nothing related to fantasy hockey, so we will get back to the fantasy content right after this, but I just want to thank you all for sticking with it, and thank you for indulging me in my really angry rant that definitely, it took a lot of time to do a lot of this research, but I was that pissed off that I wasn't able to find some of these games. And currently there's a game this Saturday that's going to be exclusive to NHL Network, and I'm already pissed off about that one as well. So sorry about this little rant, but thank you for paying attention with it the entire way, and I will see you in the next one.